Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Industry Spotlight. My name is Daniel Crane, and I am the Program Director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. We started Global Industry Spotlight as a way to highlight and learn from different organizations, entrepreneurs, small businesses, hear the tips, hear the stories, and just understand the ecosystem in general, right? Entrepreneurship takes a lot. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of failure. So it's been great to learn from the people we've talked to, and I'm really excited about our guests that we're going to be bringing in today. We are streaming live out of the Comcast Business Startup Studio, a room designed for Chicago's small business community, located at 2112, Chicago's first music, film, and tech incubator. The Global Industry Spotlight today is on Jocelyn Clarkson, a self-taught fashion designer, dream chaser, Chicagoan, wife, dog mom, get shit done kind of gal. She founded her clothing brand Swap and Strut after realizing she was in an unfulfilling finance career. After years of feeling stuck in her 9 to 5 job, she became fed up with playing small and decided to quit her career and commit to pursuing her dreams of becoming a fashion designer. Now, she is building her fashion brand with a mission to make the world a better place for women. In 2022, she started the Quit Your Job and Get Creative podcast to empower women to pursue their dreams. Hello, Jocelyn, and welcome.
Hi, hello, Daniel. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. That was a nice intro.
It was. I thought I was reading through it. I'm like, this is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah.
I love everything about this. Um, self-taught fashion designer, dream chaser, Chicago. I mean, you got the whole thing covered.
Right.
I think to start out, I'd love to hear a little bit about just your background. We can kind of start with, you know, getting into business finance, if you want to go even before that, but just a little bit of your background, and we kind of go
Yeah,
from
absolutely. I love, who doesn't love talking about themselves?
there.
So I started my career in business and finance, and that was really because, my family, they're immigrants from Guatemala, and for those who are, kids of Guatemalan parents, you always hear about these stories, right, about how they lived and how, we have it so good now. And so as a child, hearing all the stories, hearing all the hardships that my parents had to go through, all the sacrifices that they made, you kind of have this innate feeling of wanting to make them proud and being the absolutely best version of yourself. So with that, when I was growing up, I was like, okay, well, I have to be the best version. I have to be successful. So I thought for some reason that I was either going to be a doctor, or lawyer, or in business
Right.
banking. So after realizing, like, okay, reading through kind of like the job descriptions online in high school, I was like, okay, well, I think it's going to be business for me. And also watching the movie Wall Street with Charlie Sheen kind of like sealed the deal because I was like, this is awesome.
Right.
Minus like the Ponzi schemes that were going on in the background.
Minus the corruption
Yeah,
and
I
all
was like,
that.
"Oh my god, I wanna make a lot of money, like, this is
Yeah.
great," and the market seemed interesting, so I pursued that in college. I studied, business and finance at DePaul. While I was at DePaul, I was interning for various organizations. I interned for, um, kind of the big private wealth management firms, trading
Mhm.
firms. I was able to work at the Chicago Board of Options Exchange on the floor, like, that was really fun, and then I went on to work for EY and then McDonald's. That's how I ended my career. But kind of throughout my journey, I just kind of, one job led to another. But really, what I found was that I knew I wanted to go into business and finance, or so I thought, but the avenue that I took, like the actual career path, um, I didn't really decide that. It was more so my first internship, or one of my very first internships. I kind of just applied to several internships and landed an internship as an internal auditor. And then that job led to a full time job, which led to another full time job as an auditor in another company. And it kind of spiraled after that. And then, 8 years later, I kind of took a look back and I was like, I'm an internal auditor, but I never actually thought I was going to be an auditor. I never really wanted to be an auditor. I never
Right.
thought about being an auditor, but I just kind of found myself in this position because naturally, one thing led to another. But long story short, yeah, that's how I started my kind of my journey in business and finance.
Yeah, and just to back up a little bit, and kind of honor being, the child of immigrants and just the immigrant hustle in general,
Right.
and how there is pressure for first generation immigrants to provide or to take this new success or this perceived new
Right.
success and run with it, right?
Yeah.
There's not options of like, oh, I want to be an artist or I want to be a creative. It's like, no, you need
Right.
to make some money.
Exactly.
And my wife is first generation, and there's just like engineer, doctor, lawyer, like here,
Right.
kind of like here are the options for you.
Exactly.
Um, and and then to be able to kind of like fulfill that career, but then to pivot back, I think is really interesting. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit just about kind of the immigrant hustle and your
Yeah.
experience, growing up, and kind of how you approach life differently because of what your parents had
Yeah,
had dealt with.
absolutely. And I think like coming from immigrant parents, you're able to see firsthand just the limited opportunities they had, So my mom, now she's been in the US for over 20 years, but growing up, her English wasn't the best, right? So that meant that she couldn't get certain jobs or she wasn't confident enough to apply for certain jobs. And, so she was kind of left with like these odd jobs, so she didn't really have a stable income, and she wasn't working like corporate America making over 50,000. Like that was just unheard of. So like yeah, we grew up with not having a lot of money. So I think for me experiencing that, going to school in the city, seeing different kids and like different living in different poverty levels, like for me it was more so like, okay, I see my life now and I know that it can be better, especially because I have all these opportunities that my parents didn't have. And so my one way ticket out, or so to speak, to like make it better was education.
Right.
And so I've always loved fashion. I've always loved, like, I would watch America's Next Top Model to see what like the models were wearing. Like, I was always interested in that. But I knew
Before
like
the finance,
before, yeah, growing
so
up,
yeah, it was
yes.
like that was
That was what I wanted to do.
that was what you wanted to
I
do.
even thought I wanted to do some modeling, but then I realized I'm 5'2", so that wasn't gonna happen. But, I've always loved the fashion world, but I never like it's crazy. I never thought of it as a potential career because you do a quick Google search on salaries for fashion designers and it's like 30,000, right?
Right.
Like, and I know it varies, but for me, when it was really time, when I got to the point of like choosing that career, like my one way ticket out of this, breaking the cycle of poverty that just kind of warped my family, I was like, okay, well, definitely fashion's not it.
Right.
Like, and for me, I thought of it as a hobby. Like, and it's crazy to think about it now because I hate that I thought this way, but it's because I was so oblivious and like living in this bubble that I only thought like these careers were going to take me out of like this poverty world and like make my life better. But I think, just going through the motions of like going through the business careers and my years there, I realized like I was completely miserable. Like I was making great money, but completely miserable. But I think my experience being the daughter of immigrant parents and like seeing all that and like, I traveled back to Guatemala when I was 20, 21, and, I was able to see how my family lived. And it was a very humbling experience to say
Right.
the least. And, that was at the time where I was still in college. I was still, I hadn't ventured out to the professional world, but that kind of like sealed the deal that like, you're in the right spot because, now you're able to help, you send money back to your aunt, which I do. I send money back to my aunt. And, there is this idea of like, being able to provide in some sense, yes, but also being able to make your family proud and then also to inspire the next generation and just really to like better the life of your family and your like next descendants, right? So that's kind of like the lens that I viewed my career in terms of like when it was time to choose
Yeah,
a
and I
career
can
path,
imagine also for a lot of entrepreneurs or people who are starting their own businesses, they have a safety net,
right?
right? They have something they can fall back. If this doesn't work out, I'll be okay, right?
Yeah.
And that's not the case for a lot of people, right?
Yeah,
It's
no.
like whatever I do has to work.
Right.
So there's a
Yeah.
different drive. So okay, so you build this, impressive business finance career, and then COVID hits,
Yeah.
and you pivot.
Yeah. You know,
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, and I would say that my realization that I was miserable, came before COVID. I think COVID was kind of like what, it's crazy to think about, right? But I think COVID was good for me in some reasons, right? And bad for me in other reasons. But the good thing was that, I had already, I mean, back in 2018, like I had realized that I was miserable, right? Like hitting the snooze button on my alarm, right? More than what the normal people would hit snooze more than
Mm-hmm.
3 times. I just stopped applying myself. And I'm consider myself an overachiever. Like I'm teacher's pet. I was like, I had a 4.6 GPA in high school. Like I went overboard because I was like, I'm getting out of here, right? I
Right.
want to be rich, right? So like this is my one way out. So I always like been a good student, applied myself, overachiever, extracurriculars, all of that. And I stopped doing that, and I realized that I stopped doing that. Like, I wouldn't like apply to certain events. Like, I wouldn't care. Like, I just did the bare minimum. And I think about it now, you've heard the term quiet quitting, which
Right.
is like people are just not they're doing the bare minimum. I think I did exactly that back in 2018. I quiet quit. But I was just not fulfilled. I was just miserable. So, but I felt stuck, right? Because it was like, what else am I gonna do? I have this finance degree. I was working towards my internal auditor certification, which is like a 3-part certification. And it's like I was already on part 2 of 3. So I had one more part left. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna give this up. So maybe I'll just transition to a different company. And so I went to a different company and like it was worse. Like, it was so much worse. I was like, "Wow, this sucks. So let me just go to another company." I just thought maybe it was the company that I was
Mm.
working for. Then I finally went on to work for, a Fortune 500 and McDonald's for as an auditor, and it was literally the best company that I could work for. But I was still not happy, and that's when I realized that it wasn't necessarily the company, it was what I was doing. I honestly just didn't care. Like, I just wasn't fulfilling my calling. I felt like I was just going through the emotions. I was miserable. It was like if I were to give you a document of 80 pages to read, Daniel, and just be like, "All right, like, I want you to write a summary and tell me why this is important." And it's like, "What? That sounds awful." Like, that's how every day was for me. So COVID really kind of allowed me to work from home. So now I had all this time to like research and not worry
We
about
all had
my
time, right? It was the
yeah.
it was the big pause that a lot
Yes.
of us needed,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It was the big pause.
Yeah, but it interestingly enough, like when I was working for one of the big 4 and that's when COVID happened. I still had like even more work. It became like the lines were blurred. So like start and end times, there was no start and end time.
Yeah.
So it almost like my work tripled during COVID. And I was so miserable, like so miserable. I would like cry every night because first thing I would do is wake up and get on my laptop. And my manager's always already messaging me, like, where are you at on this? And I'm like, it's 8:30 in the morning. Like, leave me alone,
Right.
right?
And then time, yeah, so
Yeah,
it was the big pause and then work, borders
right. They
were
were
done.
eliminated.
It was
Yeah.
just totally eliminated,
So
yeah.
anyway, to kind of fast forward, right? So COVID, then I moved jobs during COVID. I was at McDonald's during COVID, and it just kind of allowed they like really respect like your work-life balance, which they're so awesome. Like if you can get a job at McDonald's. But anyway, like I had so much more time to just kind of like explore things, to reach out to people online, to kind of browse right through my
Mhm.
lunch hour without worrying about my manager looking behind my shoulder. Like, what are you looking at? Right. So it was really COVID that allowed me to really like explore that for fashion design, but it was never like I was like, maybe this is gonna be like a side hustle. It's
Mhm.
still not my full-time job. Like at that point, I'm still more like, okay, I can make some side income, a side hustle. And then one of the bad things that happened about COVID was that my dad passed away
I'm
from
sorry to
COVID.
hear that, yeah.
Yeah. So I woke up one day, January of 2021, to find out my dad passed away from COVID unexpectedly. So that was traumatizing in the sense that I was like, oh my God, like he just died like out of nowhere. No one was expecting that. And so it kind of that triggered something in me to say like, okay, life is too short.
Yeah.
Like clearly it's too short. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I was like, I have to do this. Like I'm done playing small. Life is too short to be miserable, and I get a little emotional talking about it. But I just kind of realized that like life is too short. So I kind of just went for it, and I was like, F this. Like I'm worth it. I There are other people who can like have their businesses. Why not me? So I kind of went for it, quit my job, and here I am 2 years
Here you
later.
are.
Yeah. So
And I mean, it's first of all, congratulations.
thanks.
It's impressive, but I think what what I what I love about the story you just told, on a couple levels. One, about you constantly moving jobs,
Yeah.
being somebody that's like, wait, I'm gonna keep trying different things
Right.
to figure it out. Like
Yeah.
you didn't stay complacent.
Right.
Like even though you were miserable, like, well, I'm gonna try another job. Okay. And then, and then you have a life changing moment with the passing of your father. And I mean, man, those kinds of moments in our lives when it's just like a wake up. It's like,
Yeah.
oh man,
Yeah. Right.
I cannot live my life like this. Like
Exactly.
this is really a gift. I need to go for it.
Right.
And then you started your business.
Yeah.
So walk us through just a couple of the first steps of how you started. So it started as a side hustle, and then how it kind of moved into the
Yeah.
main picture.
Yeah. I think about it,
It's a
and
big risk.
it is a huge risk. And I very much thank my husband because, he was the one with the stable job, right? So if it wasn't for him, I don't know that I could have explored this because, to start a business, you need money.
Yeah.
So I was at a point where I think I had talked to my husband about just like being miserable and wanting to quit my job. And I think like talking to him over the course of a year, right? And finally him being like, you know what, I can see how you're like miserable, right? And so after the passing of my dad, like we had a really serious conversation about like, hey, this is what I want to do. I'm not happy. I feel stuck. Are you willing to support me emotionally and financially through this new venture of mine? And it wasn't like he was like, here's some money to start your business. It was more like, okay, I'll take care of the basic financials. Like obviously we'll pay for the mortgage and
Right.
like you'll be fed, but that's
Yeah.
about it.
Right.
So I had the luxury of that. I mean, like that's a huge gift because I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't have that opportunity.
Right.
So I'm very thankful for that, especially for my husband. But then it was like, all right, I had some savings, not a lot, but it was enough for me to get started. And the way it really happened was after that conversation, I was like, okay, maybe I'll quit in like 3 months. And he was like, why wait 3 months? Like, just start, just start. And that's what I realized, that that's how you move forward, is literally just starting. Cause I find myself even now, I'm like, gonna do this certain thing, but I'm like, oh, I'll wait for like 3 months. Right. And then I stopped to think, okay, why 3 months? And I'm like, there's really no reason. It's just more like I'm nervous or I'm scared of making this leap or this decision. So anyway, I had my conversation with my husband and he's like, why not now? So I literally that was like on a Friday. Monday, I scheduled a call with the manager and I was like, I'm leaving. And I was like, I just gave a 2 week notice. So they had enough time to kind of train and kind of find someone else. But yeah, within 2 weeks, I was on my own, right? Which was the scary part. Because then I had to like figure out, okay, so what do I do? Like, I had already started exploring, researching fashion design during COVID while I was still working. So I still had like some sort of connection, some sort of foundation. Now is more like, okay, dive 100% in and like really grow this. So the good thing was that I had started the research and started making connections in the fashion
Okay. Yeah, that was my
industry
question.
before, so that when I did quit, it was more like continuing where I picked up from.
So what are the first steps in starting a clothing brand?
Yeah. So
So like
yeah,
the simple, like number
yeah,
one, this is what I
right.
did. Number two, I needed to connect with someone who can make the clothes, or just
Yeah.
tell me what are kind of the
Yeah.
simple steps.
And it was hard for me because I didn't know. like like
Yeah.
I just knew I wanted to start a clothing brand because I love clothes, but I honestly, Daniel, I had no idea like how do I turn these terrible drawings into actual clothes. And like
Mm.
I like tried to sew stuff myself and it looked like horrible. It was so embarrassing. But so I had to do a lot of Google research, right? Like figure it out. So what I found is now that works for me is first you need to figure out your brand and the problem you're solving and who you're making clothes for, because that dictates everything. Once you figure that out, like who your audience is, then you have to design. So that's when you go into and you draw out certain garments like dresses, tops, or whatever it is who you're designing for.
I love this. So I just want to pause. This is a really important thing. Who is your audience? No, that
Yes.
was number one. It
Yes.
wasn't
Yes.
drawing and making the clothes. It
No.
was who
No.
is your audience first? Who
Yeah.
am I making this
And
for?
that's so
So,
important
and
because
that's important, I think, across
yeah,
everything in
right.
terms
It's
of
like, what's your brand
right.
objective? Like, what's your
Right.
mission?
Sorry.
Because
So
no,
I always
it's
like to
important.
highlight that one
Yeah.
because sometimes people design first and then or
Yes.
create a product first, and then they're like,
Yeah.
okay, who's interested? It's like,
Right.
well, did you think about who is
Exactly.
interested first before
Right.
designing this? So
And
keep
that's so
going.
important, even in specifically in fashion, because like with fashion, you need to know your sizing. So like if you're designing for petites, like you need to know that up front so that you have that incorporated in your sizing. Or if you're doing plus size, or if you're doing tall, or if you're doing men, you
Right.
need to
You
know
had like
that.
4 different drawings on your website of different, like, which body type are you?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, like body types and
Right.
stuff like
The
that. So
triangle, there was like a
yeah,
couple of
yeah,
different.
you do your research, Daniel. But so once I figured that out, like who I was designing for, what kind of clothes, then I had to draw. So then I had to come up with the design itself. Once and I had terrible drawing skills, but I kind of figured out hacks on YouTube, stencils, all this stuff to kind
Mhm.
of like make me a better drawer. So once I had the drawing done, then I had to figure out, okay, how do I turn this drawing into like a sample prototype? And that's when pattern makers come in. So I had to find a pattern maker. So what I did was I basically just signed up for a fashion design class with an ex-fashion designer in Chicago. So she kind of showed me like how to draw it out, what's the process of fashion design. And once I did that, she connected me to another fashion designer that knew a pattern maker. And she connected me to this pattern maker. So I went to her and I was like, here's my horrible drawing. And she worked with me to kind of ask me the right questions, and there were so many things that I had missing in my drawings that I didn't think of. So she kind of worked with me to kind of figure that out. So she was able to build or to create a prototype out of like this fake fabric. It's called muslin. To from the picture.
Mhm.
So that takes several weeks. And so she creates kind of like the blueprint for it and then sews it up. So I came in and then you try on, that's called the sample. You try on the sample and then you figure out like, hey, maybe it's a little too tight here, it's too short, or I need to change this. So then there's revisions, and that could be anywhere from 2 to 3 rounds. So once you've got your final prototype, your final sample, then you go into production. So then you go out and you find your fabrics, buttons, zippers, like labels,
And
hang
production,
tags.
are you thinking like small runs?
Absolutely,
Okay.
because it's expensive. Like, I had all this idea. It's so funny when I started, I was like, "I'm gonna have a 15-piece collection. I'm gonna make, like, at least 50 of each design," and then I
Yeah.
quickly saw the price tags, and I was like, "Absolutely not."
Right.
Which is I think is a good way to start slow because when I started, I created 15 designs, was very expensive, only to find out, like, 2 or 3 designs were the best sellers. So had I
Right.
started smaller, I would have
Ah.
learned that what people like, what they don't like, and then I could have just made more of that as opposed to creating 15. And then like I spent so much, I wasted like $30,000. But it was a great learning experience. It was like my way of going to fashion school. So it's
But I
like,
mean, even yeah, I mean, also starting doing 15 pieces,
yeah, it's a lot.
it also you go through the process, so you
Yes,
understand that, and then being able to then narrow it down to 2 or 3.
right.
I mean,
Yeah, which is like now, like when people tell me like, how do I start my fashion line? I'm like, do not design more than 3 pieces.
right.
Like, do not do it
You hear that,
because
everyone?
do not start small. And yeah, I did small runs, so I only did like one of each size. And at
Yeah.
that point, when I started, I only had small, medium, and large. And I just started that way. I just did one of each size. Here are my designs. But then I kind of realized like what sells better. People are I found that my most popular size is extra small. Like, and I thought it was going to be a medium. So now
Right.
you're able to create more extra smalls and less mediums and etc. But then, yeah, once you have your final sample, you go into production, and that's when you have a manufacturer basically I don't want to say mass produce because I don't do mass production. It's very small quantities, but it's when they mass produce like your sample. They create it in different sizes, whether it's different colors, but basically they're creating clothes to be sold. So these are the clothes that you're going to sell to customers. And then once you have them produced, then you have them packaged up, and then you decide how you want to sell them. So I decided to sell them online, and then I did several in-person pop-ups. So I
Yeah, I
did kind
saw
of
that.
have like a clothing store back in May.
On Chicago Avenue?
Yeah, on
Okay.
Chicago and West Town, and then so that was really fun. But then I also do pop-ups where I partner with like a boutique, and for the weekend I kind of do a pop-up there, and people come and they shop and they
Smart.
try on. Yeah,
It's smart.
which is like pop-ups are like how I was able to build an organic audience and like give people the ability to actually try the clothes on, because I think like buying online is a little tricky, especially with it's a new brand that you've never heard of.
Right.
So, that kind of gave people the opportunity to try them on in person as well and then shop online. So that's kind of really the process. There's more to it, obviously,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
just
but
kind of
that
from
was
start
great.
to finish.
Right, yeah. And talk about some of the things that from your business background helped you. So that part you just walked us through was obviously a
Yeah,
new thing to learn about. But
right.
what from your business background gave you the foundation to understand kind of how or helped you with starting the business?
Yeah. So a couple things. I think one, working for one of the big four companies, you have clients as like my clients when I was working as a consultant, my clients were like financial services companies are very professional. They're paying big money to have me come in and like help them. So they had high expectations of work delivery. And so did my managers, the partners, like and the clients. So you really had to deliver and there was like no room for error. So I think that in itself allowed me to really like a
Hmm.
deliver good work, right? To just be clear when you write an email to like a pattern maker, just like being very clear because things can go wrong. And when things go wrong, they cost money. So I think one thing it was like, I learned how to be comfortable just emailing people because that's what I would do as an auditor. I would just email the VP of like accounting that I've never met before. And I had to, tell them, hey, you're being audited,
Hmm.
right? So like I got comfortable reaching out to people, but I also got comfortable. I got better at communication via email. I would lead meetings with clients, so I had to be very organized. I would have to
Right.
think things ahead, invite the right people to the room, but also be able to kind of like um, lead a meeting, right? And professionally and know what I'm talking about. So I think I learned speaking skills. But then on the business side, as part of the consulting piece, it's like you have to charge the client per hour. And then I would do like these forecast reports for them, like based on this many hours, this is how much we're going to charge the client. This is how much my work costs. So this is how much we're actually going to earn in profit margins. And so having the
You understand
knowledge.
money.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. How
But
to work.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I kind of understood margins and time put in and all that kind of stuff. So when it came time to like pricing the clothes, I kind of knew like this is my cost. This is how much it costs in terms of like actually my work put in terms of my labor. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes people just put in the cost of a product, but they don't consider labor costs
Right.
and they don't pay
Your
themselves.
time. Yeah.
Right. So it was putting all these details in and then like figuring out like how much it costs to market, how much it costs to do X, Y, and Z, but then like what's the bottom line? Like what's the profit? So understanding that like in order to have a business, a successful business, you need to make money. Whereas I think a lot of times like entrepreneurs, I don't know, it's kind of like they don't think about that. So it's really easy to like go into the negative real fast. Um
Yeah, it's just
yeah,
it's being able to balance how much it's gonna cost,
right.
and what you're charging, and again, going back to what you talked about is who's your clientele?
Right.
Like, who are you actually gonna be selling this to?
Exactly.
So figuring that one out first,
Yeah.
and it's like a balance of all of those.
Right.
And if you don't pay attention to it, right, you're gonna be working 80 hours, and you're not gonna be getting paid for those 80
Yeah.
hours. So that is true. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's always to be said, and it's different for each field. Some entrepreneurs need to put in that legwork at the beginning, but there
Right.
needs to be a plan
Right.
at some point
Yeah.
where it's like, you're living a healthy, balanced life, and
Right. Yeah, you can pay your
you
bills
can
or
pay your
right.
bills, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I think a lot of people sell themselves short. Um and for me it's like I'm not afraid, cuz my clothes they're not like fast fashion. They're not you're not going to pay $10 for a dress like
right,
because all the clothes are made by women in Chicago who are paid a fair wage, that's going to translate into the price. And then with the brand itself, I also donate 1% of every sale to a nonprofit organizations that betters the life of women. So within that, it's like a luxury premium product. So when I was starting, the clothing brand Swap and Strut, I wasn't afraid to like post these premium prices because I knew my worth and I knew my market and I knew that there were people out there who wanted this. And so I kind of like working for, the my consulting firm, we were the premium option. We
right,
were like
right,
premium prices and people were paying millions. Like it's crazy.
right.
So I was like, you know what? That kind of also gave me the confidence. I'm like, why not me? Like, why should I sell myself short? I'm not competing with fast fashion brands.
Yeah,
So
and I also think in general, people have to get used to paying for quality. I mean, that's how
yeah.
it is. Like, we've been in a bubble where,
Right.
things are made cheaply, we buy them cheaply, they don't last. I mean, that's
Right.
just, clothes in general. I mean,
Yeah.
there's as we know, right? You can get that $10 thing, but it's
Right.
not going to be great.
Yeah.
But if you spend money, I mean, as a consumer myself, I love the idea of spending money on quality.
Yeah.
and also that it's paying fair wage, and even the
Right.
1% giving to nonprofit. It's like the full package.
Right.
So yes, charge people.
Yeah, and I just find that, like, I get people that are like, "Oh my god, your prices are too expensive," and I'm like, "That's fine, you're just not my client."
Right.
Because I have
Right.
people who are, like, messaging me like, "When's the next dress coming?"
Right.
And these are, like, $500 dresses, and, like, that I have other people say it's too expensive. I'm like, "It's fine, you're just not, you're just not my
You're
client."
not there yet.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get there, but, I mean, it's fine.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, and, I love the pop-up idea, online store, no brick
Yeah,
and mortar. I mean, it's smart. You seem like you're kind of, like, able to stay, because it can be expensive to have a shop,
so
and
expensive.
right. So now, it's 2022, right?
Yeah.
It's
Almost
I know,
2023, yeah.
it's wild. It's like time since COVID has
Yeah.
kind of felt very strange. Um, what's next?
So, I'm going through a big, big change with the clothing brand. When I had my pop up, I realized that, the issue wasn't selling the clothes. People liked the clothes, they sold really fast. The issue I had was replenishing the clothes and getting them done faster and at a better rate. So, I realized I needed to streamline my operations and really cut down my costs. And so now what I realize, I'm like, you know what? I still want to fulfill my mission of, uplifting women to empower them to follow their dreams, but uplift women from poverty, pay them a fair wage, and still donate 1%. So then I kind of did research, and my family is from Guatemala, and a lot of women in Guatemala are garment workers.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, they're just paid the minimum wage,
Right.
and that's really not a livable wage. So what I realized is that I want to move production to Guatemala and find garment workers, um, and pay them above the minimum wage. But that's awesome for me because I get to align myself with like where I was born.
Right.
So
It's like
like
a full circle
right,
moment.
it's like coming
Right.
back home, right?
Right.
So to speak. To really uplift the women, make a greater impact to the women in Guatemala because I mean to them, like, getting paid double what they make, it's, like, life-changing over there.
Mhm.
So being able to pay women a fair wage, more than the minimum wage in Guatemala, really make a big impact. And then 3, cut down my costs as well, so that way I'm able to produce more and I'm able to produce faster, because what I found is that as my clientele grows, like, so did my clothes. So, like, now the 1 per size wasn't working anymore.
Right.
Now it was, like, I needed, like, 3 per size because people were coming in and buying them, and I just couldn't replenish them fast enough. So I found that in Chicago and in the US, that's just not something I'm able to do, unfortunately. I wanted to keep production in Chicago, but after, really realizing and understanding kind of the impact that would make in Guatemala, I was like, "You know what? This seems like a better shift." So
A better business
a
decision
better
too.
business decision. So
Mhm.
I'm making a big shift. So I'm going to Guatemala in a couple weeks, meeting with new manufacturers, new fabric representatives, all of that. So I'm going through a big shift with that. So that's what's coming up for Swap and Strut. But at the same time, one of the things that really helped me make that leap once I did, quit my job was I would listen to podcasts all the time. Like How I Built This is one of my favorite ones. Hello Seven, Rachel Rogers, like all these quitting your job podcasts and so that really kind of inspired me and they to this day I was driving up here and I was listening to a podcast, so like those podcasts really helped me solve problems and give me ideas. And so I thought, why not a create a platform, bring voices of women together who have quit their jobs and started creative businesses to inspire the next generation of women entrepreneurs. So I'm launching a podcast, Quit Your Job and Get Creative.
Right.
So it's launching this fall. So that's also coming up. So now
Yeah.
I have the clothing brand and the podcast. And honestly, it's like I feel like I'm the busiest I've ever been, but I'm also feel like I'm so much more aligned with like my mission, my calling, and like what I really want to do and the impact that I want to do for the world and for women.
Yeah, and I think what I have found with podcasts is it's really been wonderful for me to talk with different people and
Yeah.
learn about their stories, and
Right.
it's just helped my own understanding of the world and life and business, and it's
Right.
fun, and I you know I've definitely gotten into podcasts, the last couple years, and
Yeah.
it's been inspiring, and sometimes it's just funny. It's good to, but I love the stories. I
Yeah.
mean, that's, I think that's the connection, and also I was talking with a woman who started a podcast in Dominican Republic,
Oh, cool.
and a lot of businesses are starting to start podcasts
Right.
as a way to promote their business,
Yeah.
which is interesting. Like she was being hired by banks
Wow,
to
that's
start a yeah,
awesome.
right. It was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and her mission is very similar in empowering, underrepresented voices.
Yeah.
But I thought that was like, you know, the marriage of those two is a bit of a unique space,
Yeah.
and an interesting one to explore. Okay, so we have the podcast, we have the business, and so the final question. I feel like we came to the final question. Couple of tips, right? I
Yeah.
think there's been so much knowledge that you have dropped in this conversation, but just some of the things that you have found. I mean, as a
Absolutely.
female
Yeah.
entrepreneur coming out of finance and business, I mean, these are some
Right.
important things. Some of the hurdles I'm sure that you've had to jump over or run
Yeah.
through, whatever
Yeah.
whatever the strategy is.
Yeah.
But yeah, just some of those tips. I think focus maybe for females or for women who are trying to start their own
Absolutely.
businesses.
I think the really one thing that really made a difference in terms of like being able to actually move forward with Swap and Shred, the clothing brand, was when I mentioned that I took one fashion design course, and this is while I was still working. So if I had one tip for entrepreneurs, women or men or whatever, is so whatever industry you're interested in. So I knew that I was interested in fashion, just went on Google and look for fashion classes, fashion workshops. Whether you are a baker, right? Like you want to start your bakery, start taking baking classes. And the reason why that's important is one, you get to really understand like what it would entail. You get a little bit more familiar with the industry, but then you also build connections. So when I was in this fashion design class, I asked the instructor, I was like, hey, I'm looking for a pattern maker. And she's the one that connected me with the fashion designer, who then connected me to the pattern maker, who then
Mm.
like it's a domino effect. So I would say, first off, before you even like jump in and like quit your job and all that stuff, it's like first find a class, find a workshop, find something, right? Or like join a league or whatever it is that you're interested in. Try to find something that you can do to get involved. If you're not able to, let's say you don't live in a city, what I recommend is find people in your area who are doing what you're doing on LinkedIn. Send them an email saying, hey, my name is blah, blah, blah. I'm interested in learning more about the industry, whatever X industry. Invite them for coffee and send at least 20 emails, and at least one will get back to you. So when you meet with them, talk to them about what you're interested in learning, but then before you leave the table, have them connect you with someone else who they think would be a good fit to talk to. But I guess the most important thing is building that connection, because once you build a connection and once you know the right people, what I found is you don't need to know how to do everything. You just need to know the right people who can do the
Do the
thing,
right thing.
right? Because
Yeah.
like for me, I don't know how to make clothes. I still don't know
Right.
how to make clothes, but
Right.
I know people who can make clothes,
It's
and
that
that's who I
network. I
hire.
love the
Yeah.
advice of when you meet with somebody who you send 20 emails, one person
Yeah.
gets back, you meet with them, you're like, okay.
Right.
At the end of the conversation, get
Right.
another name.
Get another name and
Yeah.
just keep going,
Hmm.
because you are gonna and honestly, it's a domino effect, and like you're gonna build a network that way. But the first step is like you have to either send those LinkedIn emails or attend that workshop, or even ask the instructor, hey, do you know someone else that knows about baking or photography or whatever it is, and then have them connect. So that would be like my biggest tip. I think if you're doing a product-based business, like if you're creating a product, not necessarily a digital product, but like clothing or fashion or accessories or shoes, whatever it is, I definitely recommend doing pop-ups before you decide to do a brick and mortar, if that's the avenue that you're thinking, or even if you have an online store. I think doing pop-ups gives you the opportunity to build your email list. So as people walk into the pop-up and they touch your product, interact with your product, even if they don't purchase, have them drop their email, give them a gift card in return, and that's how you start building your email list. And these people have already met you, so they're more likely to buy from you. So
Right. It's
definitely
that face
pop
to
ups.
face.
Yeah, so
Right.
definitely pop ups, but then also like it gives you an opportunity to partner with boutiques or whoever you want to partner with, and kind of grow your audience and leverage their audience to grow yours. So definitely do a pop-up if you have a product-based business, and it's so important for people to touch, feel, taste your product if you're doing like
And meet
drinks.
you.
Yeah, and meet the founder, because
Yeah.
people love the story. People
They love this.
want to buy from people as opposed to like companies that are faceless, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So those are my 2 tips.
I love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us
Yeah,
today.
of
This has been
course.
a great
Yeah,
conversation.
thank you so much, Daniel. If you guys just want to find me, follow me, you can follow me on Instagram at Swap and Strut, SWAPAND.
Yeah, we can actually.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
we
sure.
actually have it probably
Perfect. Perfect.
the lower third
Okay,
going right now.
perfect. Just hit me up, follow me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks again. This is
Thank you so much,
it's been nice
Daniel.
to just talk about building a business. Obviously, I think I think it is exciting to hear the story of just everything you talked about, the advice, the pop-ups, the connections, the networking. 20 emails, you're gonna get one
Yeah.
email back. There's a strategy behind
Yes.
success,
Yes.
and then the expansion to Guatemala. Like, congratulations on all
Thank you
your
so much,
success.
Daniel. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah,
I'm so excited to talk to you. So
it's been great. Well, again, my name is Daniel Crane. I am the program director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship, and you have been listening to Global Industry Spotlight, a podcast that we started, a series that we started to learn and hear stories from entrepreneurs, small businesses, and organizations. We are streaming live out of the Comcast Business Startup Studio, located at 2112, Chicago's first music, film, and tech incubator. Thank you to Comcast Business and Shore for providing the tools necessary to make our programming happen. Visit cceglobal.org to register for free workshops. Find us on Instagram and Facebook, and tune in next Thursday for another episode of Global Industry Spotlight with Felix Guadardo, founder of Evento Medido, a platform that measures and reports the impact of your events, venues, and tours. Wishing everyone a great rest of the week. Take care.